Welcome back. Several Illinoisans are listed in the latest indictment of former President Donald Trump.
A Chicago-based publicist is among the many people facing racketeering charges in Georgia. Travion Cootie is charged with 3 counts according to those charges. Cootie had traveled to an election worker's home in Georgia in January 2021 to pressure that worker to report claims of fraud that would support Trump's allegation of election tampering. Stephen C. Lee of Illinois faces the same charges as Cootie, as well as 2 charges of criminal attempt to commit influencing a witness.
Meanwhile, Trump is vowing to fight the criminal charges and is already claiming that he has evidence that proves his innocence. Rebecca Castor has that story.
Donald Trump's attorneys say he committed no crimes and pledged to fight his latest indictment in court.
The law is completely nonpartisan.
Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis fighting back after accusations that her case against former President Trump is politically motivated. On Monday, a grand jury indicting Trump and 18 of his allies in connection with their actions to overturn the 2020 election results. Supporters of the former president argue it's another attempt by the Biden administration to weaponize the Justice Department.
It's ironic that they waited 2.5 years to try and now have it in 6 months. The reason was they wanted to mess him up right in the middle of a campaign. They wanted to line him up so that he's tied up in court.
Mr. Trump telling Fox the indictment, quote, is a continuation of the greatest and longest running witch hunt in American history. Democrats, meanwhile, are praising the move.
It is so important that we actually hold folks accountable here for what they did in trying to overturn the election.
Prosecutors are pressing for a trial to start within the next 6 months. All 19 defendants have until next Friday to turn themselves in. Legal experts, though, say they face an uphill battle in court.
Because it was brought under the racketeering statute, it's going to be very hard to get an appellate review to knock this out on threshold questions. Racketeering cases are largely fact cases.
Despite his legal troubles, the former president continues to hold a wide lead over his Republican challengers. In Atlanta, Rebecca Castor, Fox 32 Chicago.
Well, former President Donald Trump indicted for the 4th time as he leads the 2024 primary field. And here's the big question. Will these cases have an impact on his bid to return to the White House? Joining us now is Professor Stephen Caliendo with North Central College to delve into this 97-page indictment. Thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be with you, Tia.
You know, it's a lot to sort out in terms of this particular indictment, but it's already being spoken about that Trump's team is looking to try to pardon him from, or he would be able to pardon himself from this case. But this is a state case. You can pull that off maybe in a federal case. What is the likelihood that that would happen?
I don't know how to put the odds at the likelihood, but there is a mechanism by which somebody who holds federal office and is brought up on state charges can ask for the case to be moved up to the federal level. And so my guess is that they may try that. I don't know the extent to which it will happen. Remember, this is possible in this case because the actions about which the president's accused happened while he was president of the United States in December of 2020. Compare that with the New York case, the Alvin Bragg case, for instance, when the accusations were activities when he was a candidate. That cannot be moved up to the federal courts.
Let's talk about the fact that these are RICO charges. We know that they've been used in indictments for rappers and even music artists like Chicago and R. Kelly, who was sentenced on RICO charges in New York. How serious are the RICO charges that are now against Trump?
Right. It's an interesting group of statutes. I mean, states have them. There's federal RICO laws. Of course, they were put in place for organized crime. And so the idea is that actions on their own may or may not violate a particular law, but actions taken together, especially when there's more than 2 people involved, constitute a conspiracy, a racketeering, and undue influence. And so these are ways that prosecutors can get at some of the thornier crimes, and that's exactly what we're dealing with here. I mean, the accusations are that he engaged in a conspiracy, and his defense is going to be, I was just speaking of what I thought. And so this is an appropriate way to look at it, but that does make it challenging because there's 19 defendants.
Professor, talking about those associates, we know 18 of Trump's closest allies are also charged. The indictment also alleges the participation of 30 unindicted co-conspirators. Does that mean those people will testify against Trump?
Well, it probably means that they at least avoided being named as an indicted conspirator by cooperating. with the investigation. One of the most interesting things, Tia, that we learned yesterday was that Mark Meadows is a defendant. We have a good sense that he's one of the unnamed co-conspirators in the federal case about January 6th, the Jack Smith case. So we assume then that he cooperated there. He is a defendant in this case, and so it'll be interesting to see what Mark Meadows does. Part of this leverage might be to try to get some of those 19 defendants to turn and have immunity and talk.
It's a lot to this indictment. You know, I sat back and I read all really 98 pages. It ends at page 98. Not much left on that 98th page. But what sticks out in your mind as key evidence after reviewing this indictment?
Well, I mean, it's twice as long, I think, as the federal indictment that we got from Jack Smith on the January 6th case. But it's much different. I mean, in fact, the January 6th provides a roadmap for a number of these states if they wish to go down this path. Of course, the prosecutors here have been working for 2.5 years. One of the things that's most striking for me isn't really what's in the indictment, except for the fact that we may get to hear it, we may get to see it. If there's cameras in the courtroom, as they can be in Georgia, that's a whole different ballgame than what we're going to get in the federal cases. We know when we hear President Trump on that call with Raffensperger, for instance, that there's something about hearing that's different from reading a transcript of it. That might change the way the American public perceives this trial as it moves forward.
You're absolutely right. We may all have a front row seat. Professor Stephen Caliendo, it's always great to have you here breaking down these cases here on First at 4. Thank you for being with us today.
Have a good night, Tia. Thank you.
All right, you do the same. Anthony and Natalie, I'll send it back to you.